Well, guys, I think I may have just thought up one of the most despicable things that you'll ever see on World of Tanks console. It's comparable to the Panzer V-4, except this is probably more overpowered. Yeah, let's get into the video. So, the Aufklärungs Panzerpanther. What is this tank? Well, I have featured it on the channel before in one of my recent kind of videos. It was maybe a couple months back, whereby I just showcased what this thing could do. It is a fantastic tier 7 tank. The main feature of the tank, however, is of course being the Panther hull that can go 69 kilometers an hour. Yes, you did just hear me right. It's a Panther that can go 69 kilometers an hour. Now, that's not the base speed of the tank. Of course, we have put in the advanced powertrain and the traction system. And of course, in order to make this thing into a comparable to the Panzer V-4, well, we've whacked on the spool liner, which allows us to take 50% less damage when ramming. So yeah, you can already kind of assume what we've been doing in this Aufklärungs Panzerpanther, going 75 kilometers an hour into opposing light tanks, which you'll see in the gameplays later on in this video. Now, in terms of maximising this tank to the best of its potential, we have gone with a variety of different crew choices and skills to basically allow us to just, oh my god, ruffle stomp around the battlefield. And trust me, both of the replays that we're going to have in this video are 100% worth watching, and we'll have to get into that in a bit. As far as the crew skills, in order to make this thing an utter beast, we went with controlled impact, which of course reduces the amount of ram damage to myself by 20% and inflicts 20% increased damage to your opponent. So essentially you're getting a 40% disparity between the traditional value of whatever you would have taken as to how much you would have received. So essentially, if you were to ram into someone that would have done 100 damage to both of you, you'd be doing 120 damage, and they'd be taking, or you'd be dealing 120 damage, but then you'd also receive 80 damage, so you'd be having that 40 damage difference as opposed to what you would have previously within the game. Now, how does that stack up with all of the other perks? Well, of course, having 40% disparity, then having the spool liner attached with the tank as well, allows you to have, what's that? Well, you'll be taking, on average, when you ram someone, 70% less damage. Now, not only is the 70% less damage for this tank, well, if you really wanted to maximize the tank to the best of its abilities to take even less damage, you could even take armor angling, which would reduce the damage you receive by 5% even more, allowing you to in fact take 75% less damage whilst also dealing 20% more damage when you ram someone. So essentially, this tier 7 light tank, in quotation marks, can ram tier 9 heavy tanks for more damage than it receives. Yes, that is entirely right, and you'll see in the gameplay just how effective this is in the game, and yes, you'll see just how it works. So let's get into the gameplay now, and I'm going to show you what this Aufklärungs Panzerpanther is like in the game. And I'm sorry to those of you playing tier 7 right now if people decide to purchase this tank and run it just like this, because it is just an utterly devastating force if you set it up like this. Now, the first gameplay we have here is, of course, on Pilsen. This is the town map, which, yes, traditionally, for a light tank, this would not be a good map for you to be able to get. It's also tier 8, which is definitely not something you want to be doing in a tier 7 light tank with low penetration, only 137mm, I think it is, on its standard rounds, which, yeah, is very, very underwhelming. Now, this game, basically, I was running in a platoon with my friend. We both decided to run it exactly the same, so we've both got the exact same setup in the tank. And so, yeah, we're going to just YOLO in against the Tiger Shark and the LT-432. And you're about to see what devastating effect as we ram the Tiger Shark for every single drop of his hit points. Yes, we just rammed him for 1100 hit points, and then we're ramming the LT-432, which was not a good idea. That thing weighs an absolute ton, and we bounced off of him as well, which is unfortunate. But of course we're on 1500 hit points at the beginning of the game, and it just made me laugh. This is just ridiculous, the amount of damage you can take. And of course, oh, it's an Absolution, the tier 6 super heavy tank, I would say. You know, it's not particularly the lightest of tanks. Well, let's see just how light it is. Oh, 400 damage, and we only took 200 in return. Now we're going to use our mobility, and we're just pumping him using the high DPM gun, and there's absolutely nothing the opponents could do. 2000 damage already in the Aufklärungs Panzerpanther. We've completely wiped out an entire flank, and yes, we dealt 2100 damage to only receive 700 damage in total. Now what are we doing here? Well, we're just going to kind of use the actual gun of the tank for once, within this replay at least, and so we're just pumping out as much damage as possible. We do see that there is a Churchill 7, and we're on 2400 hit points of damage. We put one into him, and now we've decided, yeah, it's probably not worth actually taking any more hits from him, because we're going to get taken out if that so happens. Now the game is not over here. The excitement is definitely not over in this game, and the Churchill 7, well, his excitement is about to be over as he gets slightly taken out, well, slightly, definitely taken out by the rest of our teammates, and of course we put in a couple more shots into him before the end of the game. Now there is a mass of enemy tanks down over there. There's plenty of tanks. There's the Scorpion G, we've got Chrysler K, most of them are on full hit points, and of course me and Ted here in the Aufklärungs Panzerpanthers are on pretty low health, considering we did just completely annihilate one flank. Now I spot my target, the AMX 1375. Can we manage to ram him? Do we get the opportunity? Well, we're about to find out. How much can we do? Oh, it's all of his hit points in one for the sake of 40 alpha damage back to us. So yes, this tank is unbelievable. 3658 total damage in the Aufklärungs Panzerpanther, 170 assistance, and what did that last? What? 3.5 minutes into the game, and we managed to pick up a result like that. And of course we'll watch Ted here until the end of the game, and we'll see the post-battle result screen. Whether or not we manage to pick up the victory or not is kind of down to the enemy team and how well our team play in the end. So we'll skip ahead once Ted gets removed from the game, which, spoiler alert, Ted does get removed from the game eventually, but not for a little while, as the Panther there puts a shot but only tracks him, and he's of course up to 2131 damage as well, which is certainly no mean feat considering he is in a tier 7 in a tier 8 game against some of the most strong tier 8s in the game, like the Scorpion G. Ted manages to pick up the damaging hit on the Panther, unfortunately makes the mistake of going back towards the Progetto, and that really did cost us the game in general. The T23E3 unfortunately doesn't manage to pick up the win, and I guess we'll just move on into the post-battle results screen now. So here we are in the post-battle results screen. We picked up 74,000 silver because of course this is a premium tank. So not only do you get the fact that you're dealing damage without actually having to fire any shells and, you know, have the cost of actually firing shells, you're picking up superb amounts of damage and also dealing damage with your rounds as well. And we managed to pick up 3,658 damage, and combined between both of us, we managed to pick up, what, 6k, which, to be honest with you, looks like we may have done more damage than the entire team combined all in one. Whether or not that's actually true, it's very, very close, but you can see just how powerful the Aufklärungs Panzerpanther is in World of Tanks console right now. Let's move into the second gameplay and show you just how well it fares against some of the heavier tanks within the game. Now the next gameplay of course is on Arctic region. We are already into the game, we just skip out the beginning portion because of course it's just us moving down, and you can see I'm being super aggressive. We want this Lycan. This is the light tank. This is the position. We're going to be super aggressive. Will it work every time when we play World of Tanks? Well, of course it won't. And Ted manages to pick up the Lycan there for 700 hit points. And then the enemy Aufklärungs Panzerpanther thinks he's good but when you're coming up against two Aufklärungs Panzer Panthers, one, it just isn't enough, and we managed to pick him up for all of his hit points between us. 503 damage done. We've managed to get a decent amount of assistance at the end of the game, and you know, this strategy will not work in any other light tank, I can promise you. It just doesn't have the aggressive power in something like a Batchat 12T or the LTETB or any of the tier 8 light tanks, to be honest with you. They just don't have that kind of sheer strength of having the Panther hull that the Aufklärungs Panzer Panther has, and that is the key feature of the Aufklärungs Panzer Panther. Now, the Mauschen, this is where the Aufklärungs, this is where the tank basically becomes a little bit annoying, and that is when you're coming up against those super heavy tanks at the tiers that it can meet. Of course, it goes up to tier 9. It is not a preferential matchmaking tank, and hence why you get 220mm of penetration with your premium rounds. Now, what do we do here? Well, there is a Karo P88, and I thought, you know what, screw it, we're going after this heavy tank. How much can we do? We deal 474 damage to the Karo. Ted then rams him for 463 and finishes him off. Yes, we just dealt nigh on 500 damage to a tier 7 heavy tank. Yeah, just unbelievable how much damage you can deal with a ram. You can genuinely ram tier 9s for less damage than you'll take. I can promise you, I will try and get the gameplay at the end of this video, just some clips of where the ramming comes into effect in a tank like this. Of course, Ted's picked up 2000 damage, which is significantly higher than me, but that's predominantly because he managed to get the ram damage on the Lycan, which unfortunately we didn't manage to get, but he's just going to continue, and we'll finish the game off here. So, Himmelsdorf, tier 9 game. What are we going to do in the Aufklärungs Panzer Panther? Well, there is only one thing you could possibly do in a matchup like this, and that is, of course, going up to the top of the hill, using that mobility that this tank gets, being able to go up to 70 kilometers an hour on the flat. And of course, when you manage to go down a slope, you're going to get even faster. You can see in the bottom left hand corner we were doing 72 kilometers an hour. And yeah, when you go up the hill, significantly worse, but you know, that is traditional of any tank within the game. You're going to go slower when you're going up these inclines that you can see on Himmelsdorf, but we are able to get up onto the hill very, very quickly. And let's just hope that the enemy light tanks and the faster tanks, which of course are going to weigh less and they're going to have less armor, are going to get up on top of the hill, and we're going to be able to then ram into them. And oh dear me, the HWK 12 has decided to ram Ted. 727 damage dealt to the HWK 12 from Ted there, and of course we finish him off with the ram for 77 damage. Yeah, this is exactly why I love the Aufklärungs Panzer Panther. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't happen every game, and yes, if you ram a Mauschen, you're not going to come off better off. You will still do a significant amount of damage considering you're a tier 7 light tank, but you ain't going to be doing that ridiculous amount of damage that you probably hope for on something like those, the Spic or a tier 7 light tank that you will be facing in this thing. Now, P44 Pantera, definitely a target you could ram. Is it worth it for us? No, not particularly, because, you know, we can just use the DPM, and by no means is the DPM on the Aufklärungs Panzer Panther bad either. So it just comes into this whole holistic, damage-dealing, aggressive light tank that I love to play, and you can deal just superb amounts of damage. Now, whether or not we have a fantastic game here, well, of course, we are YOLOing into a load of enemies, and there is the Charfuteur, who unfortunately manages to track us, but we still do 274 damage considering we were almost stationary and only managed to pick up a little bit of speed against him. But yeah, see how much damage this thing can do, and if you get into the right position, you can pick up that damage very, very nicely. 1400 damage, and of course we played very, very silly at the end of the game, ramming into those tier 9s, or just going down into the hill, because obviously that's not going to work for 90% of the time because they still have armaments on their tank, and the armour of the Aufklärungs doesn't actually hold up, but the ramming potential definitely does. So there we go. the most overpowered tier 7 light tank in terms of ramming. It's like the Panzer V4 at tier 7. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and of course let me know if you're going to pick up this tank to try it out. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. Check out some of the other content, and if you want to check out the Alklarens Panzer Panther gameplay, it should be on screen right now. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.